Jenny, you know you're going to be just like your father. You're going to be worthless. You're going to be poor. You're going to be an alcoholic. You will smoke. You'll really basically amount to nothing. And you'll be just like your mom that way too. And I distinctly remember this conversation. I believe I was around 7.
Welcome to She Handled It, a podcast dedicated to sharing empowering stories of women who have faced major adversity and how they overcame it. I'm your host, Arwen Becker. I'm a wife, mom, national speaker, author, entrepreneur, and athlete. But on my journey to these triumphs, I've battled many life-altering challenges. Thankfully, I found freedom when I realized I was not alone. I invite you to join me each week as I explore the inspirational stories of determined women who overcame life's toughest moments. Ultimately, how she handled it, and so can you. Growing up in a home with a closet alcoholic, I learned a lot of skills of being able to control the situation just out of effort, time, and quite honestly, force. It wasn't until I was 20 that I became aware of my dad's alcoholism. And at that point, I had already become very good at these perfectionist behaviors. And then coupling that with being a really strong introvert, which people never believe because I'm a public speaker and the things that I do, but I am highly introverted, and being in big crowds is a challenge for me that I'm learning to continue to overcome. But I actually don't like a lot of eyeballs on me in situations where I feel out of control. And a few years ago, I would say this was displayed perfectly. My husband and I had a little speedboat at the time, and we had taken it out over to our friend's house who had just bought a new home on this lake. And so as we were approaching the dock, Randy was navigating the boat into their slip, and he told me to jump. Well, when I was looking at the distance that I had to go, I was kind of weighing the risk, and I felt that it was too far to safely jump. So I hesitated and didn't. Then he yells, "Jump!" And against every fiber in my body, I followed that prompting, jumped out of the boat onto the dock, where only one of my feet landed on the solid ground and the other began to plunge its way back into the lake. And so instantly, with this desire that I have to not look stupid and self-preservation, especially with people watching, as if that was somehow even possible, right? I somehow managed to turn my body enough to keep the majority of the weight towards the dock as opposed to shifting it and falling back in the water behind me. But that was really the least of my problems. One of my feet may have hit the dock, but the inertia of my body was not planted over that foot. It was still squarely over my hips, which gravity then took towards the ground, dock, water, towards that direction. And my entire force and weight of my body was stopped by the hard edge of the dock between my thighs. And thinking about that absolutely makes me cringe every time. Nearly 100% of my body weight fell on my womanly parts. The pain was so severe as I heard what it felt like my bones cracking in my ears as all of that force traveled from my pelvic area all the way through my spine up to the base of my neck. And it was excruciating. But what followed is such a window into a perfectionist's mind. And even today, the whole situation as I relive it, I'm embarrassed by it, by the way in which I would react to that. And so, my kids were, just watching in horror, and my youngest one's kind of chuckling a little bit because, of course, I did look stupid as much as I thought I might be able to not look stupid, right? But they didn't know how to react because I didn't react at getting hurt. I just completely played it off and got myself up on the dock and was like, oh no, I'm fine. Hey, I really needed to use the bathroom before we got here. Can I go use your bathroom? So she sends me to the closest bathroom, which felt like it was like 300 flights of stairs and a football field away. And every single step I took, I was in absolute agony. And I made my way into her bathroom. And when I pulled down my pants, you could see I was already really swollen and I was bleeding. Yet what I continued to do was play it off. And I wandered around her house for the next 30 minutes, marveling at this pretty new house of hers, pretending as though it didn't happen. And finally said to Randy, we need to go. So we headed back to the boat. I laid myself down. I was just wincing with every single wave that we traversed. And it wasn't until I was back in the safety of the passenger seat of our car that the tears just started to stream down my cheeks. I was in so much pain, and I didn't want anybody other than my children and my husband to see it. And I recognize that response is so unhealthy. Yet I can see where so much of the life that I've grown up in has groomed me to act that way. And it doesn't make it right. And yet I made my way into the doctor later that day. I had to get pelvis x-rays and exams and prayed to God that I didn't break something. And fortunately, God shone down on me that day. But I also saw this little girl who's now in her 40s, exhibiting the same behaviors that she learned throughout her youth, living in this house where you didn't talk about what was wrong. You just control the situation. You pack it up and you make it look good and you trudge forward. And my guest today has battled through much of the same intrinsic need for control and perfectionism throughout her life. And I am so honored that she's going to speak openly about it with me today. Jen Du Plessis is America's mortgage mastery mentor, and she helps sales professionals who feel overwhelmed and stressed out because they're trying to multiply their results in record time to have the courage to say yes to their personal lives. During 15 of her 37-year career in the mortgage industry, Jen has been listed as the top 1% of loan officers nationwide, spending 3 years in the top 200 of nationally ranked originators, and has funded over $1 billion in mortgage loans. She's recognized as an influencer in her industry, as a best-selling author, top podcast host, and charismatic speaker, sharing stages with such icons as Darren Hardy and Tony Robbins. Jen believes that when you work on purpose, you can play with passion. Well, Jen, I am so grateful that you took time out to join me on the show today. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. I am delighted to be here to share with you, Arwen, as much as we can in our time together.
I always want to start with a song because I have for many years really utilized music as a way to help me endure and overcome things. And I call it my overcomer playlist. So you actually came prepared with a song that you wanted to add to that playlist. What song is that and why?
Yeah, it's called Dare You to Move by Switchfoot. And it's just a song that, First of all, I'm Christian. I'm faith forward in everything that I do. And Switchfoot is a Christian band. It's kind of like a grunge alternative band for Christianity, which is hilarious. But my daughter actually knows one of the members of the band through Young Life. And that's how I got turned on to them, which was kind of fun. But Dare You to Move is sort of a montage that I work in my practice have done for years and years. And that is, and I say it differently. I say, stop talking, take action, and get results. And part of Dare You to Move is my story, which I'll be telling here shortly. But, people tend to get really frozen in whatever problems or struggles or challenges that they're experiencing. And this gives me that power, that inner, I always say it's an inside job. It gives me that inner power to say, yeah, I dare you to move. Like today is never going to be here tomorrow. And what we do know is that the past is history, the future is a mystery, and today's a present. Today's a gift. a gift for us. And so it always makes me think, don't sit still, move. God put me on this earth not to be good, but to be great. So I dare you. I dare you to move.
And I love that song. So you and I were talking a little bit, and you had mentioned that you had to overcome these major feelings of worthlessness. So why don't you take us back to where did those feelings come from? Where did it begin?
I was one of 37 first cousins. Obviously, we have many, many more now that those cousins have, spouses and children, and those children have children, including myself. But 37 first cousins. And, I was the only one who was an only child. The rest of them all had, siblings until I was 12 and a half years old when my brother was born. So there's a big gap in our age. So we actually have been in a party once before and someone said, "Do you have any siblings?" to both of us. And we both said no together. I couldn't believe it. We looked at each other and went, "Oh my gosh, that's ridiculous." But I went to college the year he went into kindergarten, and I got married not too long after that. So he's always been sort of, my child, not really a sibling. And so it's kind of interesting, that I finally had one. But my mom was one of 10. My dad came from a smaller family, but my mom was one of 10, 5 boys and 5 girls, big Catholic family. And thankfully, I lived next door to my grandparents who helped me with my faith. I went to mass with them every day before I went to school. I had an uncle that lived there. He still lives there today. I just spoke to him yesterday. He'll be 87 years old, coming up here soon. And he never got married. And so I was sort of his child. Now, the reason why I was his child, my father was an alcoholic. My mother was a verbal abuser, and they were water and oil. There's no question about it. And I don't know who perpetuated whose issues, but they both had the issues. And so, one day my uncle said to me, "Jenny, you're going to be just like your father. You're going to be worthless. You're going to be poor. You're going to be an alcoholic. You will smoke. You'll really basically amount to nothing. And you'll be just like your mom that way too." And I distinctly remember this conversation. I believe I was around 7. And, he just said, it's just natural. And, we've all heard stories about, changing the tide of times. And just because they were an alcoholic doesn't mean you have to be, and all of that. There is an alcoholism in me, but it's not alcohol. So this uncle and another, they had nicknames for all the cousins. They had Dan the Man and Jean the Machine, and they called me Jenny who ain't got a penny. And of course, I didn't understand it at that point. I just carried a penny in my shoe. In fact, I carried a penny in my shoe till about 12 years ago, because when I felt it when I walked, I would always feel it there. And it's just a reminder for me. But what I learned was that that reminder was holding me back. And this is part of the dare to move, right? It was holding me back because I kept saying, I always want to remember where I came from. And I do, but I don't want to have the penny being the reminder about it, that I have the option to be able to change my life. And that the past is history, right? And the present is a gift. So making sure that it wasn't a ball and chain for me. And that's what it was.
Can I clarify? So you putting the penny in your shoe was the reminder that you had a penny, that you were not that girl that you were being told that you were?
Yeah. And so what you end up doing is carrying a ball and chain with you, and never really overcoming that. And so that becomes a limiting belief that stays with me. And just by having it in my shoe, I was never moving past my limiting belief. Right. And so when I was little, I would just take the penny out and say, "Ha ha ha ha, that's funny. You're funny. I have a penny. Look at me." And it wasn't until later that, of course, I realized what it really meant. And so I was 9 years old, and I could hear my mom and dad fighting in the house again as I rode my bicycle up, my little banana bike, purple banana bike, or banana seat bike. And I could hear them arguing. And I thought, goodness, here I go again. And as an only child, you don't have another sibling to cry with and cuddle with in a room when all this is going on. And, so that's why my grandparents were so important. But I walked in and my father had a shotgun to my mother's head, cock loaded, ready to go. And it wouldn't be the first time. It certainly wouldn't be the last time. But this time, it had an effect on me. This time was the time that in that moment I ran out to right next door to my grandparents they have a farm, and went out to that field, and I was down on my knees and I could smell the corn and feel the cold of the dirt and the sun. And, the smells that I remember there, and just praying that I would not hear that gunshot go off. And that was the moment I said, things are going to change. I'm not going to live this life. And so the rest of my life was proving to everybody that I would not be that person or like them, proving and not living, really not living, just spending a life of proving. So yeah. And there you go. That's that age where, up to 9, you're impressionable, and had I addressed it a couple years earlier, I probably wouldn't have had the life I have. But again, today, the present's a gift. I mean, the way I am now is because of all of those things. And I'm grateful for that. Very grateful.
Was there at any time that you thought that you would be in danger, that you wouldn't get through that experience?
No, because my dad, and I'm not giving excuses for either of them, but my dad was not a violent drunk. He was also a beer drunk. And he never lost his job because of it, but he definitely would pop beer cans as soon as he left, his work. He would pop the beer cans, and he was actually a funny drunk. In fact, I had more in common with my dad when he was drinking, because he's kind of like Clint Eastwood. He doesn't say much, and he looks like Clint Eastwood, right? He looked like him. He's just sort of a John Wayne kind of guy. And I was going to send you a song about Willie Nelson, but I can't even get through the songs. I mean, just the first few notes make me cry because it makes me think of my father. But just a very quiet man. And when he drank, he actually paid attention to me, and he was more fun loving, right? He was just such a quiet man. And there's a side of me that's like that too. And there's a side that's like my mom, where I'm very boisterous and, chatty. I mean, you've known me. I'm a high I. I love people. But I have a very strong, I wouldn't say a compliance C, but I'm a very quiet person too. So I actually liked when he was drunk. Now, later in his life, before he passed away, I would have to call him before noon or 1:00, because anytime after that, he was just absolutely incoherent, and I couldn't tolerate it because I had moved on.
Did he ever overcome his alcoholism, or did he drink?
My mom would tell you he did. He never went to Alcoholics Anonymous. I have never known my father to admit that he's an alcoholic, but one of his dear friends from high school, who was kind of like a second father to me later on, was a mean hard liquor drunk, and took a shotgun under his chin to himself. And when that happened, it was a disruptor for my father.
So I assume he pulled the trigger and killed himself. Is that what you mean?
Oh, yeah.
Oh
yeah.
God.
So that was the trigger for my father to say, whoa, whoa, whoa. And so what he did is he stopped drinking beer and started drinking non-alcoholic beer. So in my opinion, no, he never overcame alcoholism. He just stopped drinking the alcohol piece.
Became a dry drunk.
Yeah.
As they call it. Yeah.
That's basically what it is.
How interesting. Did you ever see, I know this is kind of a little bit off topic. Did you ever seek like Al-Anon or anything like that? Because I grew up with a closet alcoholic. So I didn't even know until I was 20 that those were the issues that I was seeing, because my mom was so good at hiding it. And yet it's amazing how both my sister and I married alcoholics, because we had become pro-enablers and codependent, because we had seen our mom doing it very, very well.
Yeah. Well, and my codependency, but because we do have it, that's what I was saying before, is that even though you don't drink alcohol, you have alcoholic tendencies, which are habits. Regardless, it's a habit, right? So yeah, I went to Al-Anon. I think I was probably 23, 24, something like that, because my kids had just been born. I had my son at 22, my daughter at 24. And I think the pressure of being young, having, children with my husband and everything, I think it was starting to rear itself. And so I went to Al-Anon to really find out what was wrong with me, because I thought it was all me. And not them, and, all of that. And, so that's when I discovered what my, quote unquote alcoholism myself. And I have to struggle with it all the time. And it goes all the way back to the worthlessness, right? Or that you not be worthy for anything. And it goes back to it. And so how do we, there have been times like I used to play flute, and I still do, but I used to really be good at flute and piccolo. And, that was my alcoholism for years. I would come home and just go play my flute because it was escape, right? I'm also a markswoman, and I love shooting guns, right? My dad was a NRA instructor on the side and stuff. So I love doing target practice and stuff. And that's my alcoholism, right? That's my version of alcoholism to get a release. So it's just, those are two just sort of side things on what they are. It's not the true alcoholism that I have, through learning that, yeah, I kind of am like my dad. I just have a different version of it. My brother's like that too. Got it too. He doesn't drink a drop, but he has his own little version of it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's crazy how that happens. I just, like so many other people that I've talked to, didn't want to believe that I would be that person that they talk about when you grow up in an alcoholic home, the tendencies and the things that you learn. That's what I've had to learn, is that so much of the fallout of growing up in an alcoholic home is my ability to control the situation, because that's what my mom was so good at. But yet we learned other skills instead that weren't healthy.
Yeah. I mean, I think any of that stuff is unhealthy. And the funny thing is, like you said, you married, your father, you married alcoholics. I married the verbal abuser. And I think that's kind of interesting too, because the first, we've been married for 37 years. We've been together for 42. We were high school sweethearts. And, there was a breaking point in our marriage where I said, you can't treat me like this anymore. I can't have the verbal abuse. And it wasn't so much verbal abuse in the way that my mom did it. It was the control, like you're saying, the control. He's the eldest of 3 boys. His mother was a carouser because his dad was in Vietnam. And when his dad came back from Vietnam, of course, he was kind of a mess. And she just kept being a manipulator, and it was all about her. And so my husband took on the mother and father role. So what do you think he did to me? He mothered and fathered me, which is what I tried to get away from my mom, because she was so controlling. But I went right back into it. Right. And so we had to have that breakthrough, and we did. And if you've ever met us before, we are just the cutest little couple, even nowadays. Everybody just loves the dynamic between us. But yeah, he's the one who likes to control. And that is my mom.
Yeah. Gosh, that's just so crazy. So at what point for you did you start to see the change? When did you recognize, I have these feelings? I grew up in this toxic situation? Because you are a woman who now inspires thousands and thousands and thousands of people every year to be better versions of who they are. But that didn't happen overnight. So when did that start for you?
Yeah, thank you. Well, truly, I think, as we all know, in anything that we do, our mess becomes our message, because once we've figured it out, we want to share it with other people and, help solve their problems too. But yeah, for me, so if I go back, let's go back to me being in that field, right? What I started doing was, again, proving to everybody. So I was perfect. I looked perfect. I made sure but despite the fact that dad might be back at work and mom's at work, they both worked. I'm getting myself ready for school. I took pride in how I looked, how I acted. So I'll just kind of fast forward with all this. I was runner-up Miss Colorado. I played flute and piccolo in the Colorado Springs Symphony in 11th and 12th grade. And there was no one else who was in high school at the time. I was pre-med. I was going to be a cardiologist. I was a cheerleader, graduated with honors. I was the national student advisor for the American Lung Association, because both of my parents smoked as well. And that was a doctor thing. And I was like, okay, I'll do that too. And, just perfect, all in everything that I did, to prove to everyone that I wasn't them. And so I had, it modified my DNA, so that I was in the pursuit of perfection, which doesn't exist. So you can imagine how tiring that can be. But year after year. And so I ended up graduating with a degree in architecture and construction engineering, which I was the only woman in the whole class of 67 men.
Wait, so why did you not end up going with the medical? When did that switch?
You look back on that kind of stuff and it's so silly. I had a class that I hated the teacher. I absolutely hated that teacher, and it just turned me off after all that prep and all that other stuff. Just turned me off. But, I'm not a dummy. I'm a very smart girl. And so engineering, systematic process, just like being a cardiologist is sort of like that. I could have been a pilot too, because those systematic approaches are right up my alley. And that comes from my father. He was an architect. So, all of that was stewing. And so I pursued that in my personal life, in high school and in college. And then, I got married and it had to be perfect. And it was. And we had kids later and it was. And that was perfect. And everything had to be perfect. The house had to be cleaned, everything had to be perfect. But then it started happening in my business. My career in mortgage lending for 35 years, is that I was one of the few women to get started. I really helped forge this industry for women. And so I had to be perfect. I had to be, better than the guys. And so I had to prove. And then I was competitive and I had to prove and outperform and outdo and out whatever and climb that ladder and get the titles and get the money. And it's like all that stuff. And then that was all in management. And when I got into origination, it was all about proving again. And my clients were more important than my family, because I was proving. And so one evening, we were at dinner. I'm doing air quotes. We were at dinner, out to dinner, and the phone rang. And of course, I picked up the phone because my client needs me. They need me. And went outside of the restaurant and walked back and forth on that concrete balance beam that we all know when we're on that pacing outside the restaurant while everybody else is inside. And I happened to look into the restaurant, and there I saw my family laughing, creating memories, enjoying themselves. And I wasn't there. It was without me. And that was the moment that everything changed, is that I'm proving to everybody else. I'm living a life of proving, and I'm not actually living for myself. So I stopped proving and started living. And that took me down the path that I've been down for the last 15, 16 years of how do I crack the code on putting me first, my family first, and my business second, but still be successful in business. That's what my whole process is called, cracking the top producer code. And through the course of that is the umbrella of my practice, which is lifestyle business mastery, that you can live your legacy while you're building it. You can work with purpose so you can play with passion, so that you get in there and you get very intentional and try to figure out, well, what is that combination not to have to work a gazillion hours and put everything else first? So that leads me to a quote that my mom used to always say, which she didn't live by, but she would always say to me, and now it reigns true for me, which is, we flatter those we scarcely know, we please the fleeting guests, but we deal many a thoughtless blow to those we love the best. And I decided—
That's so true.
Yeah, I decided that had to change. So that's when my life became a priority.
And there's so much freedom, I know, because as you're telling this, it's so much my life as well. This constant fight and battle for things to be perfect, to control my situation, until it all fell apart, until that moment came. And I was facing this time period of basically losing everything that I had built, because I had really put myself into that place of being my own personal savior. It was kind of like, everybody get out of my way. I'll do this, that, and the other thing, until I was on the verge of a mental breakdown. I was starting to have suicidal thoughts because of this need and feeling of massive control and self-importance. I mean, quite honestly, thinking that somehow I was that important to everything staying together and not falling apart. And yet it's so freeing. Oh my gosh, Jen, when you get to that point, the freedom when you let go of control and realize you're not in control of everything, and nor should you be. That vulnerability, just in what you came through, the same things in which I have, being able to let go is such an enormous weight off your shoulders.
Oh yeah, no question. And, there's a couple things that you said, about, when you sent me your book, to read in advance, this is my story. I mean, this is just put different people in it, right? This pursuit of perfectionism comes from alcoholism, because if we're perfect, maybe daddy won't drink. And for me, that's what it was. I mean, I'll be perfect and then he won't drink. And that's how it started. But I said, I'll be perfect because then I'll prove to everybody I'm not like him. And it later became, oh, well, I'm trying to be perfect for him and he doesn't really care. So what I've learned about control is we can't control anything. There's absolutely nothing we can't control externally. The only thing that we can control is internally, and how we respond and how we react and what we think and whether we forgive people. And that's what I had to do. I had to forgive him and say, he did what he could do at the time with the information and the resources he had at the time. And he did the best he could, and she did the best she could. And now what I can do is forgive them and actually be, thankful and find the gift in what they gave me, because, it took me through this journey that helped me realize that, faith obviously is one of my important ones. Faith, family, and myself, are all very important to me. And like you said, living in a life of scarcity, although I felt it was abundance, because I got it. I got it. Just hand it to me. I got it. I don't need anybody. Nope, I got it. I'm strong. I'm really strong. I got it. And really, that's a scarcity mentality, because we're not allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. Because once we have the vulnerability, we then become attractive to everybody.
Yeah. And the other part that makes that scary is we also now open ourselves up wider to being hurt. But yet the joy and the love and the peace and these really rich senses that we get when we finally are vulnerable, and the reach and the impact that we have on other people, people are not moved by perfection. That does not cause people to change. They go, ew, no thanks. Well, I can't do that. No, thank you. I don't want to work that hard. And that doesn't inspire them to recognize we're all broken. We all need to ask for help sometimes. And we all need to recognize we have limitations, and we don't have to have it all together to still be effective. Randy and I are therapists that we've been working with for a number of years. He told me about a book that I haven't looked up, but it's called Leading with a Limp. Have you ever heard of that one?
Yeah, no, but that's a great name, because it truly is that way, right? It's, and I guess I could just say, when I finally, that story that I just told, both of those stories, I held very close to the vest, a dark vest. And I started penetrating it with little holes in it and starting to speak to it, at different points in time. Before I wrote the book, right? That's why I decided to include it in the book, although I didn't talk about the shotgun or anything, but and there's like a gazillion other stories, that I found my dad, on the side of in a ditch. I literally found my dad in a ditch one time, drunk. But all of these little stories, as I started penetrating them and poking little holes in my armor, my armor that was supposedly protecting me, I found that I was drawn more to people. And that was something that was missing in my life. It was just like, nobody can get real close, because if you get too close, then you're going to know. And that was counterintuitive. It wasn't in alignment with who I was and what I wanted to share with the world. And so I was just a bobblehead, you could just see me, that's a bobblehead, and that's all you got, right? And when that vulnerability started coming in, I started growing. Because then I was learning about other people, and that they had gone through these similar things, different things, like you had mentioned, several times when I get off stage, people come up and they're crying and they're saying, that was my life. That was mine. Thank you for sharing that, because they haven't had the restaurant story experience to yank them out of their zombie life right now. And that's what I'm hoping to do is help people realize that before they have to get that bad. Before it has to get that bad.
Oh my goodness. So many of those pieces that when we block people out, we don't have that rich life. But when we're willing to poke some holes in it and start to show that there is a softness under there, and there is a person who doesn't have everything together, and that everything isn't perfect, there's the rich life that's being lived that way. It's intoxicating and it's magnetizing to other people. They're drawn to it.
Yeah.
Are either of your parents still alive?
No. In fact, my mother's 4-year rebirth is this Saturday. I was on stage in Atlantic City when she had a stroke and died. Yeah.
And so they've obviously seen the life that you grew into and what you've done with your life. And I'm sure they're very proud of you for that.
Yes. Although my mother never told me, but she told everybody else. And so when she passed away, they all made a point to come to me. This is where I get emotional about this. Tim. They all made a point to come to me and say, I know she never told you, but she told us. And I don't know why. I don't know if she's jealous. She, said to me one time we were on the phone and she said, you're always going places and doing things, you have such a great quality of life. And it struck me. And I said, that's not what I'm trying to achieve. I'm not trying to have the McMansion and all the things. And of course, I went through a period, and we all do, and we're going through that, climbing the corporate ladder and stuff. I had to have all the things. But very quickly, I realized, especially in that conversation, I said, Mom, I really don't want a quality of life. What I'm looking for is a life of quality. And obviously, what I'm trying to achieve is not being seen from the outside. So I need to change that. And I think that's where the jealousy came in, is that she saw that I had the life of quality. Not only the quality of life, but the life of quality that she never had, that she wasn't willing to have. She wasn't willing to put her guard down, forgive, any of those things. But, thankfully, I just was surrounded by enough people that brought it to the forefront, and I was able to accomplish it.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you look back at your life, what were some of the big things that you took away from that experience?
Yeah, well, I'm going to go back to faith again. I mean, thank God my grandparents lived next door. I mean, they created a very strong foundation for me that I've always had. And, and I think that is true for my marriage as well, is that we've always, been faith forward. My business is faith forward. I'm never afraid to tell people that I'm faithful. And I think that there are people, and I coach a lot of people on helping them figure out what their core values are, right? And part of that is that I'll get people to say to me, I say, well, what do you think your core values are? Well, I don't know, faith. And I'm going, well, is that a question? Or is that a core value that you have conviction with? Well, family, was that a question? Because if your family is truly a core value for you, then why are you working 48, 60, whatever hours per week and putting them second place? So I think, again, for me, it was an inside job. I knew it would come from the inside out. And so I had to make sure that I was always strong on the inside. This is a temple that I was given. It's also a job that you have to do on your own. You have to do that internal work on your own. You have to, I'm not saying you can't get external awareness and assistance from doing it, but it is an inside job. No one else can change your mindset. No one else can, help you identify what your true power is. And so what I realized in that whole scenario was that I was just a mannequin. Right. I was just a mannequin, and I wanted to really become a human. And when I became a human, when I put all those barriers down and softened up, right, so to speak, and softened up and let myself be vulnerable and realize that I can't be perfect and recognize, because my husband used to say, well, you just want to be perfect. And I really wasn't trying to be perfect, to be on that side of, like I'm perfect, I'm in control. But it was more like, if I'm perfect, then no one's going to ever come to me and say, you're worthless. You're not worthy. You're not going to be worth anything.
Oh, you love that. I love that. And that was just when you finally got things in proper alignment.
Yeah. And I always say this too, if you master your priorities, you can master your life. So that's what I did, is I said, what are my priorities? I'm not doing this for everybody anymore. I'm doing it for me. And it's not a nastiness. It's just, this is what I want for me.
Right. And that it's funny that you say this is not a nastiness, because those of us who tend to say yes a lot more than we ought to and have a hard time of disappointing people.
Yeah. You have to forgive yourself. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's like, for me, it's a daily forgiveness. I'm forgiving myself, every single day. And so I forgive myself for allowing my father's behavior to affect me the way it did.
Oh gosh, your story is so much a part of mine. There's just so much relatability. And so thank you so much for just being open and vulnerable. So here are the rapid fire 3 final questions. So what is the best piece of financial wisdom that you've been given?
It's funny because it's fun. I worked in finance for years and years, right? 35 years. I'm thinking, I don't really even know if I got any financial wisdom for anybody. I would say, that for me, it might be pennies from heaven or something like that. A penny, I don't even know how I want to say this. The power of pennies.
Don't devalue the seed, the small things.
Yeah, it's like the whole, the power of one single penny. That one thing that he told me, Jenny ain't got a penny, right? One penny is so powerful to be able to change your life, and so there's a piece around that I think the financial wisdom is there. I think the other thing about financial wisdom is pay yourself first. I mean, that's something that, we haven't really broached it. We won't, but, my alcoholism is I can make money. I just can't keep it. And I think it all stems back down to that worthiness. You're never going to be worth anything. You're not going to be worth this. I'll always have to fight this. And I always do fight it. But it's just all of the stuff around that penny. That penny for me is power inside. It's not my kryptonite, it's my sword, right? So that's the one thing I would say, is pay yourself first.
No, you know what? It's probably the one piece of wisdom that I hear more consistently from all of my guests. I mean, over and over and over again. And if that's not telling those of you under the sound of our voices, if you are not putting aside directly from your paycheck, your commissions, whatever it is, taking a small amount off and putting it aside for your retirement, for your safety, for your security, for emergencies, if everything that comes into the household is going into your lifestyle, there is something wrong. You have to be willing to get to that point, even if it's starting with $20 a month. Just start the habit. That's the penny. It's not devaluing the seed, because there's a biblical story about the mustard seed. It's one of the smallest seeds that exists, but yet it can grow into this massive, massive, huge tree. And that's where it starts. It's not glamorous. And so I think it's the most brilliant piece of financial wisdom, quite honestly. What's a recommended book and why?
There's a gazillion books that I can recommend, but given the context of what we've talked here, I would say Atomic Habits by James Clear. And it's how to make tiny changes to have remarkable results. It's, just that one penny to have remarkable results. It's moving 1 degree. And it doesn't look like much in the beginning, but 1 degree over a period of time is miles of results.
Absolutely.
So Atomic Habits. Mm-hmm.
And what's a favorite quote?
It's probably one of my absolute, favorite quotes. I guess the great Les Brown. I'm fortunate enough to be on his speaking faculty, so I hear a lot of quotes from him. But I would say, if you're casual about your business will become a casualty, and when you're casual about your life will become a casualty as well.
So good. So good. This has been such a rich conversation for me, Jen, and so just has spoken to so many places within me that I'm just finding myself plunged right in the middle of the stories that you have told, and a lot of relatability. So thank you so much for that. How can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, the best way to get a hold of me is just to go to jenduplessis.com, go to my website.
Can you spell your name for everyone too?
Sure. It's Jen. I'm a 1N Jen. JenDuPlessis as in Sam, or crooked letter I-S.
And then you also have, tell us again your book. And then I think you also said that maybe you had some great pieces that our listeners would be able to access as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So my book is called Launch: How to Take Your Business to New Heights. And again, I'm coming out with another book in November 24th, which is my birthday, which is called Keep Smiling. So, hopefully everybody can keep an eye out for that as well. It's just a book of people with smiles, trying to keep the world going. It's all charitable content. And so the gift I want to give everyone is, again, jenduplessis.com/7 strategies. And it's the number 7, and it's plural, strategies. And you can go there and grab just a PDF document of 7 different really thought-provoking questions to help you change the mindset of your business, so that you can have this more fulfilled life that I'm talking about, this lifestyle business mastery. So there's some questions, just very heartfelt questions about what are your core values and who are the people you're surrounding yourself with, and what are the boundaries you're setting to protect those core values, and who are the people that you have around you. So just a lot of little questions to kind of get your, sort of a brainstorming session for you to say, you know what? Yeah, I said my family was important, but they sure aren't, are they?
And then you have a podcast too, a new one that you've launched. I mean, I know you had your other one for quite some time, but tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the new one is called Success to Significance, Life After Breaking Through Glass Ceilings. The reason that this one came out, and my previous one, and I still have the other one, is Mortgage Lending Mastery, which is great because it's personal and professional growth. You'll hear a lot of stories there as well. But Success to Significance was, I retired from mortgage lending 2 years ago and went networking and thought, well, I'm going to still stay in the game and I'm going to be networking in a different realm. And went out and someone said, well, what do you do? And I said, oh, I'm a mortgage. I don't know what I am, right? Because it was my identification, that success that I had. And I started going, oh my gosh, am I going to fall back into this pattern of, I don't have my job. I don't have that success. I don't have these accolades, all these things that I was looking for to prove myself that I was worthy. So now what's going to happen to me? And I realized that, I'm moving from success to making an impact, being significant to other people in this world, and being able to capture that pretty quickly. I was happy that it didn't reverse my life, like now I don't have those things. What am I going to do? I thought I was good, but you can always fall off the wagon, right? And it really became life after breaking through glass ceilings, not women, not money and women and power and jobs. Yes, all of that. But more importantly, all of the glass ceilings that we all break through all the time, because as soon as you break through, it becomes a floor and you have another one. And so we explore all of those, whether it's emotional, financial, health, family, relationships, it doesn't matter. We explore all those.
That's beautiful. And you're going to get so much out of it. You are such a wealth of knowledge. And yet I love the fact that so many of the things that you teach are out of this woman that you used to be, this woman that you have become, and this woman that you're continuing to fight to become, and giving so many of us permission to not devalue who we used to be and the pain and the difficulty and the shortcomings, but to really embrace those, talk about it. I mean, I love your honesty about your willingness to talk about the alcoholic past and then the alcoholic current and how that affects you in your day-to-day life. And I am just so grateful for you. And I thank you so much for joining with me today.
Well, thank you so much. And I do hope that it creates an aha moment or makes a significant impact on someone's life so that they can, make that pivot now and enjoy the rest of their lives rather than, regretting it on their deathbed, because no one regrets time that they, no one regrets that they don't have enough money in their bank account. They regret the time that they didn't have with their family. So that's the important thing.
Amen, sister. Thank you so much. Thanks for spending time with me on the She Handled It podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to subscribe so future interviews are automatically downloaded directly to your device. And if you want access to the show notes, including links to all the resources mentioned, visit lifewitharwin.com/podcast. Thanks again for joining me. Now charge forth, because if she handled it, so can you.